Susie, I have so much.
Nope, just get us centered in for the class, please.
All right, find a comfortable seat. Palms face down on your knees for some grounding. And notice your breath. Take this moment to set an intention for our class today. What do you wish to learn? What questions do you have? And then come back to your breath. This time manipulating it just a little bit. Inhale for a count of 6 or 8, and exhale for a count of 6 or 8. And use this breath to ground out. And slowly open your eyes. All right. Into Cami.
All right, got one more person joining in. All right, so again, you have control over your camera and over your microphone. I am recording, so if you do not want to be seen, then, well, you are not seen right now, but if you talk, you will be seen. So you can shut off your camera and then talk if you have a question, or you can do it in the chat box. All right, so when we talked about the circadian clock last week and the importance of this clock and to follow this clock, most of us grasp a concept between the day-night cycle and how important it is, and that it does have an influence on us. And today we're going to focus a little bit more only on the sleep half, but how the rest of it can affect everything else. And then we'll go into more details about exercise next week, and then nutrition the following week. So as I said last week, we said imbalance happens because of being exposed to toxins, microbes, and allergens, holding negative or repressed emotions, having inconsistent schedule, being involved in troubled relationships, inappropriate exercise, nutritionally inappropriate diet, living against nature, and living against your constitution. So there's sleep stuff that goes around constitution too. So there's certain constitutions that struggle with certain kinds of sleep at certain times or wake up at certain times. We will not be discussing that today. We're going to keep it as general as possible. The next course will actually be on more specifically the constitutions and breaking them down in the same topics. So that will be more details for next time. Otherwise, it's just too much to talk about. And I've got enough to talk about. So what we will start with is why, what, and how. So why do we need sleep? Well, Western medicine doesn't, and Eastern really doesn't too. We don't really understand exactly why we sleep. We know that it's very important. We know that we feel better when we get good sleep. We know some of the chemical imbalances that happen when we don't get sleep, but we don't really know why we get sleep. Like, why is it so important? We know the functions that happen when it goes right and when it goes wrong, but we don't know really why. But the why for this class will be to fill your tank up for the new day. So the idea is to be able to get enough sleep to fill your tank up for the next day, to be able to give you the energy that you need, to be able to keep your mind clear, and to have your body function properly. We want to make sure that we're going to bed no later than 10:30. 10:30 is cutoff time. And I often recommend even earlier than that. I had to work my way back. So I was at like 11 was pretty consistent. Even when I was studying, it was 11:30, or when I was prepping for a workshop, it'd be like 12 o'clock. But I found that I retain more information and I'm just a better person all around if I'm getting more sleep. And I don't tend to reread things. So when I'm tired, I tend to reread and reread, where if I'm rested, I can read it once and I retain the information so much better. And I'm sure we can all relate in some way to that. So working on bringing your sleep time to an earlier time. And if you have difficulties doing this, there's a process in being able to do that. Bed earlier means you'll get up and feel more alive in the morning. So the idea is to have that 7 minimum, 8 is ideal. So 8 gets the whole body system run through, it gets the melatonin out of your body so that you wake up rested. 7 hours cuts it a little close. 6, not so much, and 5 is meaning that you're going to have, you're definitely going to have health conditions. And if they haven't happened yet, they will. Like it's an accumulative process. What? So the idea is you want to wind down for sleep. So just like in the morning, we're building that morning practice, right? Doing the lemon water, tongue scraping, starting to add some of the dinacharya, the morning practice. We also in the evening want to have a practice to wind down. So I will go into more details about that, but wind down time. Lights out at 10 p.m. Again, no later than 10:30 at the latest, but it's nice to be able to go to bed or at least start functioning in your bedroom around 10 o'clock, maybe reading a book. If that doesn't stimulate you, for some people it's stimulating, especially more Vata people, but usually you can sleep, especially if you're reading a book, and I'll go into more detail about that. Night owls versus morning doves. So night owl is kind of a self-ego made label that really doesn't truly exist. There's a lot of statistics around night owls, and I will talk about that a little bit later also. How? So the idea is to be able to start stepping back with your bedtime. So that's a really good way to start. So if you're at 11:30, then 15 minutes each week, slowly making it earlier and earlier. It's getting easier now because the sun goes down quite a bit earlier than it did before. It's getting significant. Like in the morning, I really notice it because I got up at 5 this morning and it was dark, really dark. So it's getting closer, and I hate it when it gets to that 6 o'clock time where it's dark at 6. It really bothers me. So it's getting darker at night, but I think that helps most of us to wind down a little bit earlier, especially if we're connected with nature a little bit more. Use your phone as a reminder to help you wind down at night. So not necessarily staying on your phone, texting and watching movies on your phone, but there's a lot of great things. These devices can offer a lot of great tools to be able to focus on your breath, to be able to create reminders of things that you might forget. So using that as a tool to be able to remind you that, okay, time to wind down at about 8:30, and then, maybe I go for my walk at 8:30 to be able to get some fresh air and to pull in the night energy, and then, reminder to get to bed, that kind of thing. And I'll talk about my evening routine because it's pretty spot on. COVID, of course, has helped with that. Use your phone. Okay, so unplug. Make sure that you unplug at a certain time. And then there are other processes that will help. So I'll get to that. All right. So the CDC, Center of Disease Control, which we all know very, very, very well now, reports that insufficient sleep is a public health epidemic. So it has reached that level of being a public health epidemic because of the widespread occurrence of disease within communities. So especially in the United States, I'd say we're by far the worst, but there are other countries that aren't that far behind us. And how it is affecting our immune system and our digestive system. So it's affecting all the systems that are really, really important. And if some of you caught the beginning talk when Jen and I were talking before class, the immune system is the first system that we work on in Ayurveda. We focus on that system, but we get so distracted by the other systems sometimes because people come to us, they're like, oh, my reproductive system isn't working properly, or my digestive system. So then we sometimes get too distracted from what the obvious is, and that the lymphatic system is still by far the most important system to work with. And I'm going to have a whole course on that one because it's such a huge topic. We will skim through it on this. An epidemic is classified as a widespread occurrence of a disease in a community. So diseases like obesity, we're not seeing any of that in our culture, diabetes, depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety can be put in that. So it can be anxiety, depression, because there's a fine line with the difference between, because some anxiety is actually depression in disguise and some depression is anxiety in disguise. So it can flip-flop a little bit. And then seasonal affective disorder definitely is affected by our sleep cycle, and then cancer. So this is all linked to the circadian rhythm. So following the day-light cycle is really, really important. Any questions so far? Okay, so that was just a breeze by of what we're kind of going to cover this evening. All right, when we ignore our circadian clock, we are not really tied to it. So as a culture, we tend not to be tied to the clock all that well because we have so many things that distract us from actually being present to it. So unlike most people, or maybe now that COVID has happened, we probably are outside a little bit more for those of us that don't have to work in an indoor job. So for me, this is my office. So I'm outside from the time I get up in the morning, I do the chicken chores, I do my practices, and then I'm out here working outside all day, and not necessarily in the gardens, but I put a desk out, or I'm sitting in a swing chair or something like that, and I work out here all day long until evening when I have to prepare a meal to go to and then go to bed. So there's something to be said about it. I sleep really well. I usually don't have problems sleeping. Full moon cycle a little bit, but usually don't have too many problems sleeping. But I've been shifting a lot also. Immunity compromisation. So our immune system being compromised because of the lack of sleep. Like I said, I'm going to write a whole program on sleep. I'm going to write a whole program on immunity, and that will break down the more specifics. But when you talk about immune system or autoimmune diseases, we're talking about RA, so rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, type 1 diabetes, you could throw type 2 in there also, MS, Graves' disease, lupus, psoriasis, and then IBS, along with a whole bunch of other ones. Those are just some of the ones that are a little bit more common. And then of course, cancer. Cancer is an autoimmune disease. And I'll talk about that a lot in the other workshops. Autoimmune diseases are listed. There's over 80 different autoimmune diseases. So that's pretty significant. That's a lot of diseases. 30% of American adults and 40% of children are suffering from allergies, and allergens are an autoimmune disease. So when our immune system isn't properly functioning, we have an inflammatory state, which is an allergy. Our immunity is in Ayurveda is considered kind of that sacred holding of ojas. So ojas is the vitality, and when our ojas is out of balance, when our vitality is out of balance, our immune system is definitely compromised. And it's also our body's integrity. So the state of being whole and undivided. I love the way that says that. A state of being whole and undivided. I wish we all could get together and say that together as many times, like a mantra. A state of being whole and undivided, right? Okay, so I want you to kind of think about your sleep pattern. So we've been going through the Ayurvedic clock, and the ideal times to sleep are between 10 and 6 a.m., give or take a little bit. So some of us are going to shift more to that 9:30, because like Jenna, she goes to bed 9:30. She gets up at 5:30. So she's going to shift her clock a little bit in that direction. That's not a bad thing. Shifting it the opposite direction is definitely going to have more of an effect on your circadian clock. And it's even worse if your schedule is different on the weekends than what it is during the week, or work week, off time, however you want to look at that. So depending on what days they are. The longer we stay on the off time, the more it throws our clock off. The more we stay on our work time, the more imbalance we get, because it's fighting on which to choose. So I'll go into more detail with that. First, I want you to ask yourself a few questions. How well do you sleep at night? Just think about it in your head. How well do you sleep? You can always punch some things in if you want to. On a night that you need to go to bed for work, what time do you go to bed? And what time do you get up? So I know we touched this, but for the people that are joining in, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. And then in the morning, how much do you rely on an alarm to wake up? Do you need an alarm to wake up in the morning, or do you naturally just wake up? So I'm one of the fortunate ones. My dad can do this too, where we can set a time in our brain and we'll actually wake up at that time. So that's being connected with a circadian clock. I know my dad is, he's a farmer, very typical for them to have a pretty strong sleep cycle because the sun goes down, they can't do any work. They don't want to do any work. By the time they've worked so hard anyway, and they get up when the sun gets up because the cattle get up and the animals get up, so they have to feed them. Yes, that's a good plan to have. Yep. I do the same thing. My phone has an alarm to help me go to bed and stuff like that, but not to get up in the morning. So how much do you need to rely on an alarm clock to wake up? When you need to get up in the morning, how long does it take you to get out of bed once you get up? So do you find that you lay there for a while, or you snooze for a while? And then on free days, what time do you go to bed and what time do you wake up? All right, so 80% of the population need an alarm to wake up in the morning. So that's pretty significant. That's quite a few people that need an alarm clock to get up in the morning. This means that the body is out of line with the natural rhythm. I guess Rufus really wants to be a part of the video today. So this is a sign of sleep deprivation. So if you need a clock to be able to get up in the morning, and if you're pressing snooze and pressing snooze and pressing snooze and you're super lethargic in the morning, it's a sign that you're not getting enough sleep. And even if you're getting 8 hours of sleep or even 9 hours of sleep and you're waking up and you're not feeling rested, it doesn't mean that you're going through the proper sleep cycle. So, doggy, hawk last week, dog this week, whatever. And then 70% of people say that they alter their sleep on the weekends or off days versus during the week. So 70% of people have different sleep schedules on the weekends or off days than what they do during the week. And 30% of them say it's more than 2 hours. So that's pretty significant because it takes us a couple days to recover from a couple days of being off. So if we go off of our sleep schedule for, like, let's say Saturday, Sunday. So Friday, Saturday, we stay up an hour or two later. Monday, we get the Monday fog, manic Monday, right? It's like, oh my gosh, everything seems to go wrong because we're more tired, because we can't focus, we get stressed out, we have to hit the snooze a few extra times because we should be getting up in the morning to do our exercise and our practice and our dinacharya, but we find ourselves snoozing even more. And then we have a rough day. Well, it takes about till Wednesday to be able to recover from the weekend. So by Wednesday, by hump day, we usually feel pretty good. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, feel pretty good. Then we start it all over again. The reason for this is that our body starts to reset. So after about 48 hours, our body resets to a different time. And it only takes about 48 hours. That's a good news if you're trying to switch and get up earlier and go to bed earlier. But if you constantly do that every weekend, so weekends you party hard and then the weeks you get back on schedule, what that's going to do is it's going to constantly put you in your body in a set of reset, because it doesn't necessarily understand. And this is big because the melatonin production is really, really important. So the chemicals that come, melatonin is by itself is not super important. It's what it does that's important. So often we think of melatonin as, oh, it's going to help me sleep. All right. Well, no, it doesn't. It really doesn't at all. What it does is it's released through your body, and it tells the rest of your body that it's time to get to work. So what it's doing is it's not really helping you sleep. You don't take melatonin, it's not gonna be like a sleeping drug and it's gonna help you fall asleep. It doesn't. It helps bring heaviness in, so what we call a kapha, that heaviness, the dampness, the coolness into our body. It helps us to really bring that awareness to that. And then it kind of tapers off once it peaks. And it peaks about 2 hours after you go to bed. So if you're going to bed at 10 o'clock, it'll peak about midnight. And then it tapers off the rest until about 6 o'clock. 6, 7, 8 o'clock is when cortisol starts to kick in. So you get a little shot of cortisol because cortisol helps wake you up. The idea is after the melatonin runs out, you should naturally wake up. And if this doesn't happen, it's probably because something is happening in your schedule. So something is happening in here that's causing the disruption within here. So at night, what happens? Well, we kind of know chemically what happens because we can test all that. We can test the brain and what the brain's doing. We know that in the first couple hours of sleep that cells in the brain discharge debris. And we know even more than that now because the lymphatic system in the brain, there's really cool research on this where at night, the cells actually shrink in our brain and opens up the channels for the lymphatic system to flush out our brain. Isn't that cool? Like literally just whoosh, like a toilet. Toilet brain gives a whole new feeling to a swirly, right? So it flushes out our brain, and then our cerebral spinal fluid does the same thing. So our brain is getting cleansed at night. And if this doesn't happen, there is research that is closely linked to Alzheimer's and dementia, and the fact that our brain isn't getting the swirly that it really, really needs. I like that. I'm totally going to use a swirly philosophy now, but I just made that one up too. All right. So anyway, so we flush out our brain and clean our brain out every single night if we get the appropriate amount of sleep. So the sleep cycle happens as a cycle. So we go into REM sleep, REM sleep, so rapid eye movement, which is deep sleep. Then we go out of it, and then we go back in it, and then we go back out of it, and we go back in it. When we go into it, the first couple cycles are short. So they're short cycles, and then they get deeper and longer and deeper and longer. What happens if we don't get sleep at the right time, or if our clock is shifted or shortened, is we can wake up during that REM cycle. And that's when you feel super lethargic. Have you ever woke up in the morning, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm just a slug right now. And that's because you woke up during that REM cycle, or hit snooze, this one's even better, hit snooze and then said, oh my gosh, I had the deepest sleep ever, but I am like dead to the world. And for like 2 hours. And it's because you had latent melatonin release. So maybe everything was shifted a little bit this way. You woke up at 6, you snoozed, then you woke up at 6:30 and you were literally on a drug high, a drug low, because you still had so much melatonin left in your system because you didn't peak until later at night. Is this making sense? It's a lot of stuff. Becky, you're looking at me a little halfway there.
Fine, I'll unmute. I have an app that records how I sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And it lists deep and REM as separate types of sleep.
Yep.
And it always starts off with deep. First, like between 10 and 1, 10 and midnight, it's usually deep. And then I go between light and REM. The deep sleep is, for me, is not usually after midnight, it's before. So it's the REM I'm dealing with, REM and light sleep for the rest of the night.
Okay, I don't know exactly, what app are you using?
That's the Fitbit app.
Okay.
So
You
it
know,
just sits here.
yeah, I don't know how accurate they are in actual, and compared to having like sensors put on you, but this is what the research says about it. So I don't know the difference between deep is REM sleep. So deep sleep is REM sleep. And then there's non-REM sleep. So non-REM sleep would be considered light sleep. So I don't know what they're considered deep sleep, because maybe it's just your body isn't moving. So, but REM sleep is deep sleep.
Well, I do know the app isn't perfect because at some point I was actually immersed in a book for 2 hours and it said I was in deep sleep.
Right. Yeah.
So
I think it's based more on movement than what it is anything else. And that does tell a lot, because if you're tossing and turning, you can't possibly be in deep sleep, deep REM sleep. So I think that maybe they're doing the best they can with a product that they're not charging $1 million for. It gives us an idea of where we're at and kind of the structure of our sleep. Because I have a Garmin, and the Garmin does a pretty good job, because I can tell the nights when I have this nice kind of, looping effect. I'm like, oh yeah, I feel really great. Like last night, it was up and down and up and down and up and down. And that's good. And I can tell the nights where it's just like flatlined at non-REM sleep. And then I noticed that I'm more foggy. Like the night before, I had a more foggy mind. So they give us an idea. Again, electrodes are going to tell us way more when they're connected, straight to our brain. But yes, they help. So then we go in these cycles between REM and non-REM sleep. During sleep, it's important because this helps us to strengthen our immune system, and then also to repair cells. So we're not only flushing out debris out of our brain, and we're also flushing out debris out of the rest of our body. Our lymphatic system is working really hard at night. And then it works hard during the day too, but not in our brain. Definitely not in our brain. Our brain's got way, way more important things to do than be flushed out at that time. That's why this rest is so important. But the immune system needs to be able to flush out also. And then it repairs cells. So after the flushing happens, which happens between about 10 and 2 o'clock during the pitta time, when it would be more active, then we go into the time where our body's repairing. So in the vata time of night, our body is actually doing some fixing. So this is when our body starts to fight against any inflammation that's happening in our body, which is an autoimmune response. So fights the inflammation, takes care of inflammation, heals cells, rejects cells, fights with the immune system. So we really want to take this time to really rest and recover and restore. And if we don't, we're missing out on a lot of these processes that happen during that time. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about melatonin and night owl. So melatonin is created in the pineal gland. So it's a small gland in our brain. It releases in the brain to make you feel sleepy. That's kind of the generic term of it. But it actually, what it does is when it's released into our body, it circulates through our whole body, and it tells all of our systems that their jobs are going to change. So just like in a school, during the day, school teachers, kids are there, and then at night, the janitors are doing work. So we think of it as at night, the janitors are coming in, the cleaning's coming in, I'm sure now, as they prepare for school COVID style, is that the janitors and everybody are going to have to work night shifts to be able to clean the place completely up so that the new day can start. So this is actually a really good example of what's happening, and probably happening in a lot of businesses that are trying or attempting to open up, grocery stores, that kind of thing. So the crews come in at night to supply and to clean out. During the day, all the customers are in, all the daytime people are in. So our body works the same way. We have a system, and we have hormones and stuff that work during the daytime, and we have hormones and things that work at night. And it's important because melatonin is the divider in that. So when it's released, it's saying, hey, yo, everybody, we're switching jobs. So teams are changing right here. So they change, and when they change, it's a drastic difference in that change. It goes from, you know, from the work of digesting to the work of digesting food and assimilating food to the work of repair and eliminate. Because in the morning, first thing we should be doing upon rising is having a bowel movement. So getting all of those toxins out of our body. Then it releases in the evening and peaks about 2 hours after you fall asleep. So that should be about midnight, give or take a little bit. So for Jenna, because she goes to bed a little bit earlier, hers would peak a little bit earlier than that. And then because she gets up a little bit earlier. And then it decreases about an hour after it leaves your system, then you naturally wake up. So if you can get to the point where you're not using alarm clock, as long as you're not kapha, kaphas are probably going to have to use alarm clocks because they tend to want to sleep too much. Pittas usually don't. We wake up pretty good to go in the morning. Vatas usually have problems staying asleep. So when I talk about constitutions, we'll talk a lot about the details and how that falls in. About an hour after it leaves your system naturally. So then if you wake up groggy. So when you do get 8 hours of sleep or a good solid 7.5, do you feel groggy in the morning? This means that your body is not quite calibrated to the day-night cycle. And there's definitely practices you can do that go around that to be able to keep keep you on that cycle. Okay, let me see. I've got so many notes here. Studies have shown that the brain can reset itself in 48 hours. So I talked about this a little bit earlier. This is when, has everybody been out camping? Like, I'm just talking about in a fancy craft of some kind or a cabin of some kind. I'm talking about really camping. So primitive cabin would work, or tent camping or wilderness camping, if you've been to the Boundary Waters, that kind of stuff. So when you go there, what time do you fall asleep? Like, you don't make it much longer than the campfire gets started. You maybe get a s'more made. It's like, man, I am like exhausted because you've been outside in the sun following the sun cycle. All right. Anybody did a really long trip in like the Boundary Waters or something? I did a 10-day. So that's a long enough trip. Definitely resets your body because you wake up naturally as soon as the sun comes up. And that might be at 5:30 in the morning, depending upon the time of year you go. And then in the evening, about 8 o'clock, if it's later in the year, it's like you're about ready to crash. And you don't feel like looking at anything else. You don't feel like having flashlights on. You might sit by the campfire until the mice start eating at your bag, you know, that kind of stuff. Camping issues. Or a skunk chews off all your pull tabs on your backpack. But when we get into nature and when we go camping, even at the cabin, you can notice a difference. So those of you that have cabins, you can reset pretty good at a cabin because you're kind of pushed away from everything. It is a little bit different. And then, you know, when do you notice that you wake up? So this is our natural cycle. So this is really what we want to key into, is that our body naturally wants to align with the circadian clock. Research shows that when you go to bed late, your body is trained to release cortisol around 8 a.m. So the later you go to bed, you run more of a chance that your melatonin will be longer and that cortisol will release at the wrong time. So if this happens, cortisol really is released to help wake us up. So cortisol isn't always a bad thing. So often we think of cortisol as the enemy because it's a stress hormone, but it's a hormone that we definitely need. And when melatonin is flushed through our body to tell us that our systems are going to change, cortisol does the same thing, saying, hey, yo, we got to wake up because we need to digest food, we need to move our body, we need to be able to think and be alert. Cortisol is our alert hormone. Melatonin is our relax, rest, wind down, but boost up the other system's hormone. So they have two completely opposite effects. There's ones in the digestive system that do the same thing that are absolutely fascinating too. So we want to make sure that we're starting to wind down wind down about 8 p.m. 8:30 sometimes works. So, but if you go to bed early, you want to make sure that you're winding down a little bit earlier. This means trying to stay off of, any devices after about 8:30 if your goal is 10 o'clock. So checking your phone once in a while for a text is fine, but we're talking about sitting and watching something. So when you sit and watch a cell phone, they're much brighter and they're much closer to your face. So they actually stimulate you more than what a TV would. Not saying you should be watching TV in the night. And anyway, you can record all those shows and you can watch them later. The best thing about the huge upgrades with TVs, right, is that you can record shows and you can watch them later. Watch them earlier in the evening. Watch them at another time, but not after 8:30 because there's some significant research around the blue light and how the blue light affects us. And people can say, oh, well, we've got the red light on the phone now, or we've got the dimmer on the phone now. You're still holding it this close to your face. I don't care who you are. You're not holding it like this. You're probably holding it like this with bigger letters if you need them, that kind of stuff. So we want to make sure that we're really minimizing the amount of light that goes in, to the point that when we start winding down at night, we start dimming the lights in our house more too. So part of the routine that I do in the evening is I actually close all of my drapes. So I close the drapes because I'm putting my house to bed, close the chicken coop, put the chicks to bed. I start dimming lights in the house so I don't have a lot of bright light in the house. I've really been able to cut out any sort of computer stuff at night. After 8:30, I go for a walk with Rufus. He loves that walk at night. He gets really frustrated when really frustrated when we don't. He takes it out on something else. So we go for our walk in the evening, and the idea is to be able to connect with nature. So much of this is how do we or don't we connect with nature? So when you look at your schedule, how do you or don't you connect with nature? And when we connect with nature at night, it's also important to connect with nature in the morning, or connect with the sun in the morning, because that clock is definitely a reset point. And the sun is a really great tool to be able to use. So at night, going for the walk and connecting with the lunar energy, so the moon coming up and the sun going down, and then in the morning, being able to connect with the sun also. So getting 10, 20-minute walk in the morning, same in the evening, will really reset your clock. And it's pretty effective because I've been doing it. I've had a couple clients that I've recommended to do a morning and an evening walk, and their sleep is improved. And some people really struggle, really struggle with sleep. Let's see. So night owls. We'll talk a little bit about night owls. Night owls is definitely a delayed melatonin production. And it's kind of a form of insomnia if you really think about it. So there's a lot of research around sleep. So it's good information to be able to have. But if you're tricking your body into thinking that it's supposed to go to bed at a different time, it will adapt in some ways, but there are always consequences to it. Oh my gosh, Rufus. There's always consequences to it. And a lot of times it can even be something that we're doing because we're under more stress at work or something like that. They want to get one more thing done. We're packing for a vacation, something like that. So we want to get one more thing done, but this delayed response affects the rest of our next day and maybe even further on. It sets in some restlessness. And then what happens is when we start to get restless, he's antsy tonight. Rufus, enough. Lay down. When the restlessness sets in, we tend to go to social media, we tend to do online surfing, we tend to be checking the news online, which is never a good idea. We check what COVID's doing, which is not a good idea. So we have all of these things that we tend to go to. And again, that's just going to stimulate more, causing more restlessness. There's research around night owls tend to get less exercise, tend to be more dangerous drivers, so making poorer decisions. They tend to smoke and drink more often. They have a higher tendency of depression. They experience poorer sleep, even if they're getting 8, 9, 10 hours, because they'll sleep till noon or 2 o'clock. And they are more tired during the day. So when they actually have to be awake during the day for some reason, some function, some event, they just can't function at all because their body is producing melatonin at the wrong time. Okay. So another thing that we want to look at is weight gain because of not enough sleep. So often people, when they think of weight gain, they think of, oh, my nutrition isn't right, or my exercise isn't right. And there's people that exercise a lot and eat pretty well, but don't sleep well, and they gain weight. And a lot of times stress weight will gain right here in our midsection. All right, proper weight gain is actually on our thighs and hips, breasts too in women, but if you gain weight right here, the muffin top weight, that's definitely stress and then lack of sleep. Our body accumulates cortisol and then throws it in different areas because it doesn't know what to do with it. There's a lot more about that, but we're not going to be able to get into that today. Other things that we want to look at is when we don't get enough sleep, we don't get that deeper experience of sleep, that we're going to affect our endocrine system. So this is our stress hormones, our thyroid. So it's the hormones that stimulate our thyroid, growth hormones and sex hormones. So this is really important because if you're not getting enough sleep, so if your lymphatic system's clogged, you're not getting enough sleep, and then what happens is every other system kind of goes completely sideways. So they all affect each other. Can you see how this clock really has a lot to say? I mean, each thing has an effect on it. So if you eat supper too late, so if you eat supper here, your body releases a little bit of cortisol to give you energy to be able to digest food. During this time at night, between 6 and 10 p.m., our body does not digest food well. Past here, we don't digest food at all. It just sits in our gut until morning. So if we eat late, it's going to affect our sleep. If we eat earlier or we fast, depending upon what's recommended or how your schedule is, then we leave this open to be able to flush our system, so to speak, of the toxins that it's accumulated throughout the day. Any questions? I have so much more. Huh. All right, so I'm going to go to a couple. There's another concept called social jet lag. It's really fascinating, but we won't be able to get to that today. Couple of things that I want to tell you about sleep and some of the practices that you can do is eating a lighter, earlier supper. So eating 7 would be the latest, but 6 o'clock is ideal. So eating 6 o'clock or earlier. Having a habit of closing the kitchen. So once you're done, so my routine in the evening is I cook the meal, I eat, and then I clean the kitchen because I want to wake up to a clean kitchen, or at least as clean as I can, as clean as realistic. It doesn't have to be spotless, but I like things tidied up and waking up to a tidy kitchen. Does anybody else like that? Yeah, I like a tidy kitchen. Yep, yeah. There's just something about it when you wake up in the morning and it's a mess. It's like it already starts your day in a cluttered mess, right? Where if there's a dish in the sink, like that's not a big deal. But if there's pots and pans and the countertop's dirty, it's really kind of stressful, not necessarily even on our conscience, although it seems like we're all there, but our subconscious picks up on that. It's just like having a really cluttery house. Do you ever feel that when you have a cluttery house, you feel more cluttered, or you feel more cluttered in your body, or even you get constipated? Like really weird things start to happen. So Frankie's laughing at me right now. Yeah, you can't poop because your kitchen's dirty, you know? Oiling your feet. So doing abhyanga practices. So in the evening, I have moved, I don't take the shower in the morning. I take my shower in the evening. I find that it's better for me to be able to cleanse off the day. And then I put oil on my skin afterwards because I use a very specific oil for my skin that I really, really enjoy. Unless it's super hot out, then I'm just going to sweat it off because I don't use air conditioning. But I'm assuming most of you use air conditioning, so you would be able to do a light practice. in Ayurveda, we talk a lot about Abhyanga practices. Abhyanga is body oiling from head to toe. They're great. And they're great to practice maybe once a week, but not realistic to incorporate into your life every day unless that's a priority, or if a practitioner has recommended that as a practice every day. What there is there's a bypass. So there's really beautiful oils out there that you can put on your skin, just like you would a lotion, that nourish your skin and that calm your body down. So for me, at night, when I put the oil on my skin, I sleep so well. And then there's specific oils that certain companies use that I can recommend in our information. Is you can put it on your feet. So if you don't take showers at night, you can put oil on your feet and then maybe your lower back. I'd always recommend in your nose and in your ears to help calm vata down. So you really want to have the qualities of heaviness. Oils are heavy, and we want that heaviness to kind of bring us into sleep. Read a book instead of using book or magazine or article instead of reading on an e-reader or your phone or watching TV. Meditate for a little bit at night. And that can be a meditation where you're watching the sunset or you're watching the sun go down. That's very meditative. Meditative walk is always helpful. That's what I do. Pranayama, yoga nidra. So in your classwork, you have a yoga nidra that is recorded if you're in the 30-day Ayurvedic challenge. Journaling. So Jen and I, before class, we're talking about a couple of topics that we want to write articles about. And one of them is journaling. I've got Abhyanga oil massage on there. And then golden milk is the other one. So journaling is really good for being able to process things. So if you find that you linger or hold on to certain things, if you can use the journaling to be able to do a dump. So just like your body is detoxing at night, it's a great time to use a journal, and it can be just blah, blah, blah. It doesn't have to be anything specific, but you'll find that when you take the time to do it every night, that eventually it becomes something you look forward to or something that you can really dump in. I have a journal that's with me all the time. So I'm kind of journaling and taking notes all the time. I do it in the evening. I do it in the morning after my meditation, or sometimes before if I feel really cluttered, but it definitely helps. And there's a lot of research, really great research around journaling and the importance of it. And I've pushed it off for decades, and I finally really have gotten into it. And then the golden milk. I will give you guys a recipe for golden milk, and I will record how to make it. Golden milk, you can either, if you don't drink dairy, so if you drink dairy, you're going to use cow's milk and use whole milk or fatter. And if you don't drink dairy, then almond milk is fine. And you make a turmeric blend with some other herbs and spices, and it's absolutely fabulous. It's like having dessert before bed. So when I have to switch people from eating at 9 o'clock to eating at 6 or 5:30, it's often something we have to do. Also, it helps you to be able to sleep because it's got the heavy qualities of kapha. Other than the cool, it's warm. But it's like drinking dessert. It's really fantastic, especially in the winter. It's like the best thing in the winter, isn't it, Jenna? Yeah. All right. So there's my segue to Jenna.
Yes, golden milk. I love milk, so it's my favorite thing. All right, so pranayama. I'm not going to talk deep stuff into it. Cami knows a lot more about it since the start of COVID, but I'm just going to talk about the basics. So pranayama is breath work. So prana means breath or life force, and so pranayama is practicing breathing. Like we do it in class a lot when we do the inhales with each movement and then exhale with another movement. That's a form of it. Nadi Shodhana, which we'll talk about more in just a little bit. That's one of the best practices to do. And then the Bhastrika and Pratyaloma that Cami does at the beginning of her yoga classes is part of the practices as well. So prana is subtle energy. It's in every single part of the universe, and every living creature has prana in it. And we're able to look at who we are as a person by how we breathe. For instance, if you have a higher breath pattern more in your chest, you tend to be a little bit more anxious. If you're able to bring your breath into your belly, you're able to stay more calm. And that's how we can change our breath and change our consciousness as well. So breathing is an automatic process, but many of us don't do it correctly if we don't pay attention to it. So inefficient breathing comes from poor posture, weak respiratory muscles, wear and tear of everyday stress, and shallow breathing. So slunching over, breathing into only our chest and only the upper part of our lungs, that all gives into poor breathing patterns. So in yoga and pranayama practice, we really practice breathing slowly, engaging our whole entire torso, and breathing through the nose. That's kind of the most important part of it. So when you go through your pranayama practice, you ask yourself 3 questions. Why do you breathe? How do you breathe? And who is doing the actual breathing? So when you are doing your actual pranayama practice, you really want to focus on the breath. And so that it's, I saw Cammy's message pop up for the chat and it got me really distracted. So we want to, and so we try to really focus on the breath and not have it be so much as an automatic process. We go through our whole entire day with it just happening. We really want to focus on paying attention to each inhale, a little bit of rest, and then each exhale with another little retention rest after that as well. The benefits of pranayama, we're able to improve digestion, you're able to stay in the moment, and it's a natural relaxant. And then going into Nadi Shodhana, because it's my favorite practice, it's the practice that relaxes me the most. So it is inhale through your left nostril, exhale through your right, inhale through your right nostril, and exhale through your left. And the beginning process is we're able to do that with our fingers closing one nostril and then the other. I know Cami practices doing it hands-free, which I think is crazy, but she does it. Just takes a lot of practice. But you want to start with 6 passes. So what I just explained would be 1 pass, and then you want to work your way up to 12, and then ultimately 10 to 15 minutes of practice time. But it does, if you're not used to doing any sort of breathing practices at all, you may get a little bit of nauseous and a little bit of lightheadedness. You're just not used to having all of that oxygen in. And I will upload a video of walking you through how to do Nadi Shodhana for that 6 practices. I just didn't get to it today. So after this class, I'll have it up there for you. Is there any questions on pranayama? I know that was very basic information, but all right. Okay. Is there any other stuff, Cami, you want to mention before meditation?
Did anybody else have any questions? Like I said, there's so much more to cover. I covered like this much, just like the tip of the iceberg as far as the information goes, because I can talk about how caffeine affects it. I think I'm going to have one talk on caffeine and the effects of caffeine and what sources are actually have caffeine in them and how that can affect sleep. And then, you know, food is going to play a part in that. And then also talking about certain kind of drugs and what they do, because even if we don't take the drugs, it's nice to know what they're actually doing to the body, because it's very interesting information. Because you think that it help you get deep sleep. In reality, the research shows it really doesn't help at all. So it might be more of a kind of a placebo effect, but the repercussions of taking the drugs themselves is damaging. So it's interesting to learn more about that, but I'll have more information on that later. So Jenna, what do you think?
All right. I do have a quick question.
Yeah.
What is kind of the cutoff time for caffeine?
Well, okay, so that's one of the things I didn't get into, but the cutoff time for coffee depends on the person. So Ayurvedically, I would guess if you're Kapha Vata, you should be cutting it off no later than noon. Pittas
Really?
tend to have higher, faster digestive systems. So more than likely, they have enough of the chemicals to be able to digest it quicker. Problem is that coffee is a drug that has a half-life on it, meaning that even when it's getting, when the effects, you feel the effects go away, it has still half of a life, meaning it still affects you up to 5 to 7 hours after you drink it. You can still have a half-life. So there's, like I said, there's a whole lecture on caffeine and the effects of caffeine. Yeah, Becky, that's fine. Yep. I'd eventually cut it out if you could. There's other things you can do that are actually so much more fun. The herbal coffees, if you really don't need them, the herbal coffees are really good. I know I love coffee too, but I'm starting to look at it and go, oh, like what
Hey,
it's
I've
doing.
cut way back, okay? Way back, because my first coffees were not just coffee. They were all the chocolate and all the sugar and all the whip. So
Yep.
then I cut out the whip.
Yep.
And then I went to skim milk. And then I cut out half the syrup. And, you know, I was in India in March, end of February in March, and they didn't have mocha in the morning. So I went to lattes. I'm sorry, they didn't have chocolate
Yep.
for mochas. So it was lattes for 2 weeks. It's like, and I haven't gone back to it. One more thing pulled out of it, okay? I'm weaning myself slowly.
Well, let me make a suggestion then, okay? Get some cardamom and add that to it. What it does is it helps the effects of caffeine, okay? And it tastes really good in there. So get some cardamom
Just
and add that to it.
ground up or
Yep,
shaved
ground.
in?
Yep, ground.
Okay.
Just add a sprinkle into your coffee, and then make sure you always have some sort of weight in it. So that would mean if you use dairy, use like
Whole
half and
milk.
half, or cream, or whole milk, or if you
Yeah.
use non-dairy, it can be coconut milk's fine. It's a little light, but almond milk works really well if it's not too sugary. Becky, I went the same way with with coffee. I was drinking turtle mochas, and I cut myself, and then I did a detox, so then I had to completely cut it out. And then I'm like, oh, I'll drink coffee, and then I went to like Americanos, and then I'm like, no, I really do like the dairy in there. It really affects me. So yeah, add a little cardamom to it. It'll make it taste really good. Not that it doesn't taste good already. And then always make sure that you drink organic coffee if you're going to drink coffee. Never, ever, ever drink non-organic coffee unless you're going out with a friend and having a latte. But if you're making your own coffee, just make sure that it's organic. Okay? It's
Okay.
really important. The hormones that are in, or the estrogenic hormones that are in non-organic coffee is pretty intense. So, okay, that's why I'm going to have a whole lecture about coffee, because yeah, I should have one on wine too, and the effects of that, because that's another whole like, oh my gosh, this is not working for me ever. So, all right, any other questions? Fantastic, ladies. I hope y'all have a great evening, and I'll see you next week. If you have any questions, let me know, okay?